Story 56 of Sweetheart Roland. There was once on a time a woman who was a real witch and had 2 daughters, one ugly and wicked, and this one she loved because she was her own daughter, and one beautiful and good, and this one she hated because she was her stepdaughter. The stepdaughter once had a pretty apron, which the other fancied so much that she became envious and told her mother that she must have and would have that apron. "Be quiet, my child," said the old woman, "and thou shalt have it. Thy stepsister has long deserved death. Tonight, when she is asleep, I will come and cut her head off. Only be careful that thou art at the far side of the bed, and push her well to the front." It would have been all over with the poor girl if she had not just then been standing in a corner and heard everything. All day long she dared not go out of doors, and when bedtime had come, the witch's daughter got in bed first, so as to lie at the far side. But when she was asleep, the other pushed her gently to the front, and took for herself the place at the back, close by the wall. In the night, the old woman came creeping in. She held an axe in her right hand, and felt with her left to see if anyone was lying at the outside. And then she grasped the axe with both hands, and cut her own child's head off. When she had gone away, the girl got up and went to her sweetheart, who was called Roland, and knocked at his door. When he came out, she said to him, "Hear me, dearest Roland, we must fly in all haste. My stepmother wanted to kill me, but has struck her own child. When daylight comes and she sees what she has done, we shall be lost. But," said Roland, "I counsel thee first to take away her magic wand, or we cannot escape if she pursues us." The maiden fetched the magic wand, and she took the dead girl's head and dropped 3 drops of blood on the ground, one in front of the bed, one in the kitchen, and one on the stairs. Then she hurried away with her lover. When the old witch got up next morning, she called her daughter and wanted to give her the apron, but she did not come. Then the witch cried, "Where art thou?" "Here on the stairs." "I am sweeping," answered the first drop of blood. The old woman went out, but saw no one on the stairs, and cried again, "Where art thou?" "Here in the kitchen." "I am warming myself," cried the second drop of blood. She went into the kitchen, but found no one. Then she cried again, "Where art thou?" "Ah, here in the bed, I am sleeping," cried the third drop of blood. She went into the room to the bed. What did she see there? Her own child, whose head she had cut off, bathed in her blood. The witch fell into a passion, sprang to the window, and as she could look forth quite far into the world, she perceived her stepdaughter hurrying away with her sweetheart Roland. "That shall not serve you," cried she. "Even if you have got a long way off, you shall still not escape me." She put on her many-league boots, in which went an hour's walk at every step, and it was not long before she overtook them. The girl, however, when she saw the old woman striding towards her, changed with her magic wand her sweetheart Roland into a lake, and herself into a duck swimming in the middle of it. The witch placed herself on the shore, threw breadcrumbs in, and gave herself every possible trouble to entice the duck. But the duck did not let herself be enticed, and the old woman had to go home at night as she had come. On this, the girl and her sweetheart Roland resumed their natural shapes again, and they walked on the whole night until daybreak. Then the maiden changed herself into a beautiful flower, which stood in the midst of a briar hedge, and her sweetheart Roland into a fiddler. It was not long before the witch came striding up towards them, and said to the musician, "Dear musician, may I pluck that beautiful flower for myself?" "Oh yes," he replied, "I will play to you while you do it." As she was hastily creeping into the hedge, and was just going to pluck the flower, for she well knew who the flower was, he began to play, and whether she would or not, she was forced to dance, for it was a magical dance. The quicker he played, the more violent springs she was forced to make, and the thorns tore her clothes from her body, and pricked her and wounded her till she bled. And as she did not stop, she had to dance till she lay dead on the ground. When they were delivered, Roland said, "Now I will go to my father and arrange for the wedding. Then in the meantime I will stay here and wait for thee," said the girl, "and that no one may recognize me, I will change myself into a red stone landmark." Then Roland went away, and the girl stood like a red landmark in the field and waited for her beloved. But when Roland got home, he fell into the snares of another, who prevailed on him so far that he forgot the maiden. The poor girl remained there a long time, but at length, as he did not return at all, she was sad and changed herself into a flower and thought, "Someone will surely come this way and trample me down." It befell, however, that a shepherd kept his sheep in the field and saw the flower, and as it was so pretty, plucked it, took it with him, and laid it away in his chest. From that time forth, strange things happened in the shepherd's house. When he arose in the morning, all the work was already done. The room was swept, the table and benches cleaned, the fire on the hearth was lighted, and the water was fetched, and at noon, when he came home, the table was laid, and a good dinner served. He could not conceive how this came to pass, for he never saw a human being in his house, and no one could have concealed himself in it. He was certainly pleased with this good attendance, but still at last he was so afraid that he went to a wise woman and asked for her advice. The wise woman said, "There is some enchantment behind it. Listen very early some morning if anything is moving in the room, and if thou seest anything, let it be what it may. Throw a white cloth over it, and then the magic will be stopped." The shepherd did as she bade him, and next morning, just as day dawned, he saw the chest opened, and the flower come out. Swiftly he sprang towards it, and threw a white cloth over it. Instantly the transformation came to an end, and a beautiful girl stood before him, who owned to him that she had been the flower, and that up to this time she had attended to his housekeeping. She told him her story, and as she pleased him, he asked her if she would marry him. But she answered, "No," for she wanted to remain faithful to her sweetheart Roland, although he had deserted her. But she promised not to go away, but to keep house for the shepherd for the future. And now the time drew near when Roland's wedding was to be celebrated, and then, according to an old custom in the country, it was announced that all the girls were to be present at it, and sing in honor of the bridal pair. When the faithful maiden heard of this, she grew so sad that she thought her heart would break, and she would not go thither, but the other girls came and took her. When it came to her turn to sing, she stepped back, until at last she was the only one left, and then she could not refuse. But when she began her song, and it reached Roland's ears, he sprang up and cried, "I know that voice. That is the true bride. I will have no other." Everything he had forgotten, and which had vanished from his mind, had suddenly come home again to his heart. Then the faithful maiden held her wedding with her sweetheart Roland, and grief came to an end, and joy began. End of story 56.
Story 57 of Household Tales. Household Tales by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. The Golden Bird. In the olden time there was a king who had behind his palace a beautiful pleasure garden in which there was a tree that bore golden apples. When the apples were getting ripe, they were counted, but on the very next morning one was missing. This was told to the king, and he ordered that a watch should be kept every night beneath the tree. The king had 3 sons, the eldest of whom he sent as soon as night came on into the garden. But when midnight came, He could not keep himself from sleeping, and the next morning again an apple was gone. The following night the second son had to keep watch. It fared no better with him. As soon as the 12 o'clock had struck, he fell asleep, and in the morning an apple was gone. Now it came to the turn of the third son to watch, and he was quite ready, but the king had not much trust in him, and thought that he would be of less use even than his brothers. But at last he let him go. The youth lay down beneath a tree, but kept awake, and did not let sleep master him. When it struck 12, something rustled through the air, and in the moonlight he saw a bird coming whose feathers were all shining with gold. The bird alighted on the tree, and had just plucked off an apple when the youth shot an arrow at him. The bird flew off, but the arrow had struck his plumage, and one of his golden feathers fell down. The youth picked it up, and the next morning took it to the king and told him what he had seen in the night. The king called his council together, and everyone declared that a feather like this was worth more than the whole kingdom. "If the feather is so precious," declared the king, "one alone will not do for me. I must and will have the whole bird." The eldest son set out. He trusted to his cleverness, and thought that he would easily find the golden bird. When he had gone some distance, he saw a fox sitting at the edge of a wood. So he cocked his gun and took aim at him. The fox cried, "Do not shoot me, and in return I will give you some good counsel. You are on the way to the golden bird, and this evening you will come to a village in which stand 2 inns opposite to one another. One of them is lighted up brightly, and all goes on merrily within, but do not go into it. Go rather into the other, even though it seems a bad one." "How can such a silly beast give wise advice?" thought the king's son, and he pulled the trigger. But he missed the fox, who stretched out his tail and ran quickly into the wood. So he pursued his way, and by evening came to the village where the 2 inns were. In one they were singing and dancing, the other had a poor, miserable look. "I should be a fool indeed," he thought, "if I were to go into the shabby tavern and pass by the good one." So he went into the cheerful one, lived there in riot and revel, and forgot the bird and his father and all good counsels. When some time had passed, and the eldest son for month after month did not come back home, the second set out, wishing to find the golden bird. The fox met him as he had met the eldest, and gave him the good advice of which he took no heed. He came to the 2 inns, and his brother was standing at the window of the one from which came the music, and called out to him. He could not resist, but went inside, and lived only for pleasure. Again some time passed, and then the king's youngest son wanted to set off and try his luck, but his father would not allow it. "It is of no use," said he. "He will find the golden bird still less than his brothers, and if a mishap were to befall him, he knows not how to help himself. He is a little wanting at the best." But at last, as he had no peace, he let him go. Again the fox was sitting outside the wood, and begged for his life, and offered his good advice. The youth was good-natured and said, "Be easy, little fox, I will do you no harm. You shall not repent it," answered the fox. "And that you may get on more quickly, get up behind on my tail." And scarcely had he seated himself, when the fox began to run, and away he went over stock and stone, till his hair whistled in the wind. When they came to the village, the youth got off. He followed the good advice, and without looking round, turned into the little inn, where he spent the night quietly. The next morning, as soon as he got into the open country, there sat the fox already and said, "I will tell you further what you have to do. Go on quite straight, and at last you will come to a castle, in front of which a whole regiment of soldiers is lying. But do not trouble yourself about them, for they will be all asleep and snoring. Go through the midst of them straight into the castle, and go through all the rooms, till at last you will come to a chamber, where a golden bird is hanging in a wooden cage. Close by there stands an empty gold cage for show, but beware of taking the bird out of the common cage and putting it into the fine one, or it may go badly with you." With these words the fox again stretched out his tail, and the king's son seated himself upon it, and away he went over stock and stone till his hair whistled in the wind. When he came to the castle, he found everything as the fox had said. The king's son went into the chamber where the golden bird was shut up in a wooden cage, whilst the golden one stood hard by, and the 3 golden apples lay about the room. But, thought he, it would be absurd if I were to leave the beautiful bird in the common and ugly cage. So he opened the door, laid hold of it, and put it into the golden cage. But at the same moment, the bird uttered a shrill cry. The soldiers woke, rushed in, and took him off to prison. The next morning, he was taken before a court of justice, and as he confessed everything, he was sentenced to death. The king, however, said that he would grant him his life on one condition, namely that if he brought him the golden horse, which ran faster than the wind, and in that case he should receive, over and above, as a reward, the golden bird. The king's son set off, but he sighed and was sorrowful, for how was he to find the golden horse? But all at once he saw his old friend the fox sitting on the road. "Look you," said the fox, "this has happened because you did not give heed to me. However, be of good courage, I will give you my help, and tell you how to get to the golden horse. You must go straight on and you will come to a castle, where in the stable stands the horse. The grooms will be lying in front of the stable, but they will be asleep and snoring, and you can quietly lead out the golden horse. But of one thing you must take heed, put on him the common saddle of wood and leather, and not the golden one which hangs close by, else it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail. The king's son seated himself upon it, and away he went over stock and stone until his hair whistled in the wind. Everything happened just as the fox had said. The prince came to the stable in which the golden horse was standing, but just as he was going to put the common saddle upon him, he thought, "It will be a shame to such a beautiful beast if I do not give him the good saddle, which belongs to him by right." But scarcely had the golden saddle touched the horse than he began to neigh loudly, and the grooms awoke, seized the youth and threw him into prison. The next morning he was sentenced by the court to death, but the king promised to grant him his life, and the golden horse as well, if he would bring back the beautiful princess from the golden castle. With a heavy heart the youth set out, yet luckily for him, he soon found the trusty fox. "I ought only to leave you to your ill luck," said the fox, "but I pity you, and will help you once more out of your trouble. This road takes you straight to the golden castle. You will reach it by eventide. And at night, when everything is quiet, the beautiful princess goes to the bathing house to bathe. When she enters it, run up to her and give her a kiss, and then she will follow you. And you can take her away with you. Only do not allow her to take leave of her parents first, or it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail, the king's son seated himself upon it, and away the fox went, over stock and stone, till his hair whistled in the wind. When he reached the golden castle, it was just as the fox had said. He waited until midnight, when everything lay in deep sleep, and the beautiful princess was going to the bathing house. He then sprang out and gave her a kiss. She said she would like to go with him, but she asked him pitifully and with tears to allow her first to take leave of her parents. At first he withstood her prayer, but when she wept more and more and fell at his feet, he at last gave in. But no sooner had the maiden reached the bedside of her father than he and all the rest of the castle awoke, and the youth was laid hold of and put into prison. The next morning the king said to him, "Your life is forfeited, and you can only find mercy if you take away the hill which stands in front of my windows and prevents my seeing beyond it, and you must finish it all within 8 days. If you do that, you shall have my daughter as your reward." The king's son began and dug and shoveled without leaving off. But when after 7 days he saw how little he had done, and how all his work was as good as nothing, he fell into great sorrow and gave up all hope. But on the evening of the 7th day, the fox appeared and said, "You do not deserve that I should take any trouble about you, but just go away and lie down to sleep, and I will do the work for you." The next morning when he awoke and looked out of the window, the hill had gone. The youth ran full of joy to the king and told him that the task was fulfilled, and whether he liked it or not, the king had to hold his word and give him his daughter. So the two set forth together, and it was not long before the trusty fox came up with them. "You have certainly got what is best," said he, "but the golden horse also belongs to the maiden of the golden castle." "How shall I get it?" asked the youth. "That I will tell you," answered the fox. "First take the beautiful maiden to the king, who sent you to the golden castle. There will be unheard of rejoicing. They will gladly give you the golden horse, and will bring it out to you. Mount it as soon as possible, and offer your hand to all in farewell, last of all to the beautiful maiden. And as soon as you have taken her hand, swing her up onto the horse, and gallop away, and no one will be able to bring you back, for the horse runs faster than the wind." All was carried out successfully, and the king's son carried off the beautiful princess on the golden horse. The fox did not remain behind, and he said to the youth, "Now I will help you to get the golden bird. When you come near to the castle where the golden bird is to be found, let the maiden get down, and I will take her into my care. Then ride with the golden horse into the castle yard. There will be great rejoicing at the sight, and they will bring out the golden bird for you. As soon as you have the cage in your hand, gallop back to us, and take the maiden away again." When the plan had succeeded and the king's son was about to ride home with his treasures, the fox said, "Now you shall reward me for my help." "What do you require for it?" asked the youth. "When you get into the wood yonder, shoot me dead and chop off my head and feet." "That would be fine gratitude," said the king's son. "I cannot possibly do that for you." The fox said, "If you will not do it, I must leave you. But before I go away, I will give you a piece of good advice. Be careful about 2 things. Buy no gallows flesh, and do not sit at the edge of any well." And then he ran into the wood. The youth thought, "That is a wonderful beast. He has strange whims. Who is going to buy gallows flesh? And the desire to sit at the edge of a well, it has never yet seized me." He rode on with the beautiful maiden, and took his road home again through the village in which his 2 brothers had remained. There was a great stir and noise, and when he asked what was going on, he was told that 2 men were going to be hanged. As he came nearer to the place, he saw that they were his brothers, who had been playing all kinds of wicked pranks, and had squandered all their wealth. He inquired whether they could not be set free. "If you will pay for them," answered the people, "but why should you waste your money on wicked men and buy them free?" He did not think twice about it, but paid for them, and when they were set free, they all went on their way together. They came to the wood where the fox had first met them. As it was cool and pleasant within it, the 2 brothers said, "Let us rest a little by the well, and eat and drink." He agreed, and whilst they were talking he forgot himself and sat down upon the edge of the well without thinking of any evil. But the 2 brothers threw him backwards into the well, took the maiden, the horse and the bird, and went home to their father. "Here we bring you not only the golden bird," said they, "we have won the golden horse also, and the maiden from the golden castle." Then there was great joy, but the horse would not eat, the bird would not sing, and the maiden sat and wept. But the youngest brother was not dead. By good fortune the well was dry, and he fell upon soft moss without being hurt. But he could not get out again. Even in the strait the faithful fox did not leave him. It came and leapt down to him, and upbraided him for having forgotten its advice. "But yet I cannot give up so," he said. "I will help you up again into daylight." He bade him grasp his tail and keep tight hold of it, and then he pulled him up. "You are not out of danger yet," said the fox. "Your brothers were not sure of your death and have surrounded the wood with watchers, who are to kill you if you let yourself be seen." But a poor man was sitting upon the road, with whom the youth changed clothes, and in this way he got to the king's palace. No one knew him, but the bird began to sing, the horse began to eat, and the beautiful maiden left off weeping. The king, astonished, asked, "What does this mean?" Then the maiden said, "I do not know, but I've been so sorrowful, and now I am so happy. I feel as if my true bridegroom has come." She told him all that had happened, although the other brothers had threatened her with death if she were to betray anything. The king commanded that all people who were in his castle should be brought before him, and amongst them came the youth in his ragged clothes. But But the maiden knew him at once and fell upon his neck. The wicked brothers were seized and put to death. But he was married to the beautiful maiden and declared heir to the king. But how did it fare with the poor fox? Long afterwards the king's son was once again walking in the wood, when the fox met him and said, "You have everything now that you can wish for, but there is never an end to my misery, and yet it is in your power to free me." And again he asked him with tears to shoot him dead and chop off his head and feet. So he did it, and scarcely was it done when the fox was changed into a man, and was no other than the brother of the beautiful princess, who at last was freed from the magic charm which had been laid upon him, and now nothing more was wanting to their happiness as long as they lived. End of 57.
Story 58 of Household Tales. The Dog and the Sparrow. A sheepdog has not a good master, but, on the contrary, one who let him suffer hunger. As he could stay no longer with him, he went quite sadly away. On the road he met a sparrow who said, "Brother Dog, why art thou so sad?" The dog replied, "I am hungry and have nothing to eat." Then said the sparrow, "Dear brother, come into the town with me, and I will satisfy thy hunger." So they went into the town together, and when they came in front of a butcher's shop, the sparrow said to the dog, "Stay there, and I will pick a bit of meat down for thee." And he alighted on the stall, looked about him to see that no one was observing him, and pecked and pulled and tore so long at a piece, which lay on the edge, that it slipped down. Then the dog seized it, ran into a corner, and devoured it. The sparrow said, "Now come with me to another shop, and then I will get thee one more piece, that thou mayst be satisfied." When the dog had devoured the second piece as well, the sparrow asked, "Brother Dog, hast thou now had enough?" "Yes, I have meat enough," he answered, "but I have had no bread yet." Said the sparrow, "Thou shalt have that also, come with me." Then he took him to a baker's shop, pecked at a couple of little buns, till they rolled down, and as the dog wanted still more, he led him to another stall, and again got bread for him. When that was consumed, the sparrow said, "Brother Dog, hast thou now had enough?" "Yes," he replied, "now we will walk a while outside the town." Then they both went out on the highway. It was, however, warm weather, and when they had walked a little way, the dog said, "I am tired and would like to sleep." "Well, do sleep," answered the sparrow, "and in the meantime I will seat myself on a branch." So the dog lay down on the road and fell fast asleep. Whilst he lay sleeping there, a wagoner came driving by, who had a cart with 3 horses, laden with 2 barrels of wine. The sparrow, however, saw that he was not going to turn aside, but was staying in the wheel track in which the dog was laying, so it cried, "Wagoner, don't do it, or I will make thee poor." The wagoner, however, growled to himself, "Thou wilt not make me poor," and cracked his whip and drove the cart over the dog, and the wheels killed him. Then the sparrow cried, "Thou hast run over my brother dog and killed him. It shall cost thee thy cart and horses." "Cart and horses indeed," said the wagoner. "What harm canst thou do me?" and drove onwards. Then the sparrow crept under the cover of the cart and pecked so long at the same bung hole that he got the bung out, and then all the wine ran out without the driver noticing it. But once, when he was looking behind him, he saw that the cart was dripping, and looked at the barrels and saw that one of them was empty. "Unfortunate fellow that I am!" cried he. "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow, and flew on to the head of one of the horses and pecked his eyes out. When the driver saw that, he drew out his axe and wanted to hit the sparrow. But the sparrow flew into the air, and he hit the horse on the head, and it fell down dead. "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" cried he. "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow. And when the driver drove on with the 2 horses, the sparrow again crept under the cover and pecked the bung out of the second cask, so all the wine was spilt. When the driver became aware of it, he again cried, "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" But the sparrow replied, "Not unfortunate enough yet," and he seated himself on the head of the second horse and pecked his eyes out. The driver ran up to it and raised his axe to strike it, but the sparrow flew into the air, and the blow struck the horse, which fell. "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow, and lighted on the third horse's head, and pecked out his eyes. The driver, in his rage, struck at the sparrow without looking round, and did not hit him, but killed his third horse likewise. "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" cried he. "Not unfortunate enough yet," answered the sparrow. "Now will I make thee unfortunate in thy home," and flew away. The driver had to leave the wagon standing, and full of anger and vexation went home. "Ah," he said to his wife, "what misfortunes I have had! My wine has run out, and the horses are all three dead." "Alas, husband," she answered, "what a malicious bird has come into the house, and it has gathered together every bird there is in the world, and they have fallen on our corn up there, and are devouring it." Then he went upstairs, and thousands of birds were sitting in the loft, and had eaten up all the corn, and the sparrow was sitting in the midst of them. Then the driver cried, "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" "Not unfortunate enough yet," answered the sparrow, Wagoner. "It shall cost thee thy life as well," and flew out. Then the wagoner had lost all his property, and he went downstairs into the room, sat down beside the stove, and was quite furious and bitter. But the sparrow sat outside in front of the window and cried, "Wagoner, it shall cost thee thy life." Then the wagoner snatched the axe and threw it at the sparrow, but it only broke the window and did not hit the bird. The sparrow now hopped in, placed itself on the stove, and cried, "Wagoner, it shall cost thee thy life." The latter, quite mad and blind with rage, smote the stove in twain. And as the sparrow flew from one place to another, so it fared with all his household furniture, looking-glass, benches, table, and at last the walls of his house. And yet he could not hit the bird. At length, however, he caught it with his hand. Then his wife said, "Shall I kill it?" "No," he cried, "that would be too merciful. It shall die much more cruelly." And he took it and swallowed it whole. The sparrow, however, began to flutter about in his body, and fluttered up again into the man's mouth. Then it stretched out its head and cried, "Wagoner, it shall still cost thee thy life." The driver gave the axe to his wife and said, "Wife, kill the bird in my mouth for me." The woman struck, but missed her blow, and hit the wagoner right on his head, so that he fell dead. But the sparrow flew up and away. End of story number 58.
Story number 59 of Household Tales. Household Tales by Jacob and Willem Grimm, Frederick and Catherine. There was once on a time a man who was called Frederick, and a woman called Catherine, who had married each other and lived together as young married folks. One day, Frederick said, "I will now go and plow, Catherine. When I come back, there must be some roast meat on the table for hunger, and a fresh draught for thirst." "Just go, Frederick," answered Kate. "Just go, I will have all ready for you." Therefore, when dinner time drew near, she got a sausage out of the chimney, put it in the frying pan, put some butter to it, and set it on the fire. The sausage began to fry and to hiss. Catherine stood beside it and held the handle of the pan, and had her own thoughts as she was doing it. Then it occurred to her, "While the sausage is getting done, thou couldst go into the cellar and draw beer." So she set the frying pan safely on the fire, took a can and went down into the cellar to draw beer. The beer ran into the can and Kate watched it, and then she thought, "Oh dear, the dog upstairs is not fastened up. It might get the sausage out of the pan." Well thought of. And in a trice she was up the cellar steps again, but the Spitz had the sausage in its mouth already and trailed it away on the ground. But Catherine, who was not idle, set out after it and chased it a long way into the field. The dog, however, was swifter than Catherine and did not let the sausage journey easily, but skipped over the furrows with it. "What's gone is gone," said Kate, and turned around, and as she had run till she was weary, she walked quietly and comfortably and cooled herself. During this time, the beer was still running out of the cask, for Kate had not turned the tap. And when the can was full, and there was no other place for it, it ran into the cellar and did not stop until the whole cask was empty. As soon as Kate was on the steps, she saw the mischance. "Good gracious," she cried, "what shall I do now to stop Frederick knowing it?" She thought for a while, and at last she remembered that up in the garret was still standing a sack of the finest wheat flour from the last fair, and she would fetch that down and strew it over the beer. Yes, she said, he who saves a thing when he ought has it afterwards when he needs it. And she climbed up to the garret and carried the sack below, and threw it straight down on the can of beer, which she knocked over, and Frederick's draught swam also in the cellar. That's all right, said Kate. Where the one is, the other ought to be also. And she strewed the meal over the whole cellar. When it was done, she was heartily delighted with her work, and said, "How clean and wholesome it does look here." At midday home came Frederick. "Now, wife, what have you ready for me?" "Ah, Freddie," she answered, "I was frying a sausage for you, but while I was drawing the beer to drink with it, the dog took it away out of the pan, and whilst I was running after the dog, all the beer ran out, and whilst I was drying up the beer with the flour, I knocked over the can as well. But be easy, the cellar is quite dry again," said Frederick. Kate, you should not have done that, to let the sausage be carried off, and the beer run out of the cask, and throw out all our flour into the bargain. Indeed, Frederick, I did not know that. You should have told me. The man thought, if my wife is like this, I must look after things more. Now he had got together a good number of thalers which he changed into gold, and said to Catherine, "Look, these are counters for playing games. I will put them in a pot and bury them in the stable under the cow's manger. But mind you, keep away from them, or it will be the worse for you." Said she, "Oh no, Frederick, I certainly will not go." And when Frederick was gone, some peddlers came into the village who had cheap earthen bowls and pots, and asked the young woman if there was nothing she wanted to bargain with them for. "Oh, dear people," said Catherine, "I have no money and can buy nothing, but if you have any use for yellow counters, I will buy of you." "Yellow counters? Why not? But just let us see them. Then go into the stable and dig under the cow's manger, and you will find the yellow counters. I am not allowed to go there." The rogues went thither, dug and found pure gold, and then they laid hold of it, ran away, and left their pots and bowls behind in the house. Catherine, though she must use her new things, and as she had no lack in the kitchen already, without these, she knocked the bottom out of every pot, and set them all as ornaments on the paling which went round about the house. When Frederick came and saw the new decorations, he said, "Catherine, what have you been about?" "I have bought them, Frederick, for the counters, which were under the cow's manger. I did not go there myself. The peddlers had to dig them out for themselves." "Ah, wife," said Frederick, "what have you done? Those were not counters, but pure gold and all our wealth. You should not have done that." "Indeed, Frederick," she said, "I did not know that. You should have forewarned me." Catherine stood for a while and bethought to herself. Then she said, "Listen, Frederick, we will soon get the gold back again. We will run after the thieves." "Come then," said Frederick, "we will try it. But take you some butter and cheese that we may have something to eat on the way." "Yes, Frederick, I will take them." They set out, and as Frederick was the better walker, Catherine followed him. "It is to my advantage," she thought. "When we turn back, I shall be a little way in advance." Then she came to a hill where there were deep ruts on both sides of the road. "There one can see," said Catherine, "how they have torn and skinned and galled the poor earth. It will never be whole again as long as it lives." And in her heart's compassion, she took her butter and smeared the ruts right and left, that they might not be so hurt by the wheels. And as she was thus bending down in her charity, one of the cheeses rolled out of her pocket down the hill. Said Catherine, "I have made my way once up here, I will not go down again. Another may run and fetch it back." So she took another cheese and rolled it down, but the cheeses did not come back. So she let a third run down, thinking, "Perhaps they are waiting for company and do not like to walk alone." As all three stayed away, she said, "I do not know what that can mean, but it may perhaps be that the third has not found the way and has gone wrong. I will just send the fourth to call it." But the fourth did no better than the third. Then Catherine was angry and threw down the fifth and sixth as well, and these were her last. She remained standing for some time watching for their coming, but when they still did not come, she said, "Oh, you are good folks to send in search of death. You stay a fine long time away. Do you think I will wait any longer for you? I shall go my way. You may run after me. You have younger legs than I." Catherine went on and found Frederick, who was standing, waiting for her because he wanted something to eat. "Now, just let us have what you have brought with you," said he. She gave him the dry bread. "Where have you the butter and the cheeses?" asked the man. "Ah, Freddie," said Catherine, "I smeared the cart ruts with the butter, and the cheeses will come soon. One ran away from me, so I sent the others after to call it." Said Frederick, "You should not have done that, Catherine, to smear the butter on the road and let the cheeses run down the hill. Really, Frederick, you should have told me." Then they ate the dry bread together, and Frederick said, "Catherine, did you make the house safe when you came away?" "No, Frederick, you should have told me to do it before." "Then go home again and make the house safe before we go any further, and bring you something else to eat. I will wait here for you." Catherine went back and thought, "Frederick wants something more to eat. He does not like butter and cheese, so I will take with me a handkerchief full of dried pears and a pitcher of vinegar for him to drink." Then she bolted the upper half of the door fast, but unhinged the lower door, and took it on her back, believing that when she had placed the door in security, the house must be well taken care of. Catherine took her time on the way and thought, "Frederick will rest himself so much the longer." When she had once reached him, she said, "Here is the house door for you, Frederick, and now you can take care of the house yourself." "Oh, heavens," said he, "what a wise wife I have. She takes the under door off the hinges, that everything may run in, and bolts the upper one. It is now too late to go back home again, but since you have brought the door here, you shall just carry it farther." "I will carry the door, Frederick, but the dried pears and the vinegar jug will be too heavy for me. I will hang them on the door. It may carry them." And now they went into the forest and sought the rogues, but did not find them. At length, as it grew dark, they climbed into a tree and resolved to spend the night there. Scarcely, however, had they sat down at the top of it, than the rascals came thither, who carry away with them what does not want to go, and find things before they are lost. They sat down under the very tree in which Frederick and Catherine were sitting, lighted a fire, and were about to share their booty. Frederick got down on the other side and collected some stones together. Then he climbed up again with them and wished to throw them at the thieves and kill them. The stones, however, did not hit them, and the knaves cried, "It will soon be morning. The wind is shaking down the fir apples." Catherine still had the door on her back, and as it pressed so heavily on her, she thought it was the fault of the dried pears, and said, "Frederick, I must throw the pears down." "No, Catherine, not now," he replied. "They might betray us." "Oh, but Frederick, I must. They weigh me down for too much." "Do it then and be hanged." Then the dried pears rolled down between the branches, and the rascals below said, "The leaves are falling." A short time afterwards, as the door was still heavy, Catherine said, "Ah, Frederick, I must pour out the vinegar." "No, Catherine, you must not. It might betray us." "Ah, but Frederick, I must. It weighs me down far too much." "Then do it, and be hanged." So she emptied out the vinegar, and it sprinkled the robbers. They said amongst themselves, "The dew is already falling." At length Catherine thought, "Can it really be the door which weighs me down so much?" and said, "Frederick, I must throw the door down." "No, not now, Catherine. It might discover us." "Oh, but Frederick, I must. It weighs me down far too much." "Oh, no, Catherine. Do hold it fast." "Ah, Frederick, I am letting it fall." "Let it go, then, in the devil's name." Then it fell down with a violent clatter, and the rascals below cried, "The devil is coming down the tree," and they ran away and left everything behind them. Early next morning, when the two came down, they found all their gold again and carried it home. When they were once more at home, Frederick said, "Ah, now, Catherine, you too must be industrious and work." "Yes, Frederick, I will soon do that. I will go into the field and cut corn." When Catherine got into the field, she said to herself, "Shall I eat before I cut, or shall I sleep before I cut? Oh, I will eat first." Then Catherine ate, and eating made her sleepy, and she began to cut, and half in a dream cut all her clothes to pieces, her apron, her gown, her shift. When Catherine awoke again after a long sleep, she was standing there half naked, and said to herself, "Is it I, or is it not I? Alas, it is not I." In the meantime, night came, and Catherine ran into the village, knocked at her husband's window, and cried, "Frederick, what is the matter? I should very much like to know if Catherine is in." "Yes, yes," replied Frederick. "She must be in and asleep." Said she, "'Tis well then, I am certainly at home already," and ran away. Outside, Catherine found some vagabonds who were going to steal. Then she went to them and said, "I will help you to steal." The rascals thought that she knew the situation of the place, and were willing. Catherine went in the front of the houses and cried, "Good folks, have you anything? We want to steal." The thieves thought to themselves, "That's a very fine way of doing things," and wished themselves once more rid of Catherine. Then they said to her, "Outside the village the pastor has some turnips in the field. Go there and pull up some turnips for us." Catherine went to the ground and began to pull them up, but was so idle that she did not gather them together. Then a man came by, saw her, and stood still, and thought that it was the devil who was thus rooting amongst the turnips. He ran away into the village to the pastor, and said, "Mr. Pastor, the devil is in your turnip ground, rooting up the turnips." "Ah, heavens," answered the pastor, "I have a lame foot. I cannot go out and drive them away." Said the man, "I will carry you on my back." And he carried him out on his back. And when they came to the ground, Catherine arose and stood up her full height. "Ah, the devil!" cried the pastor, and both hurried away. And in his great fright, the pastor could run better with his lame foot than the man who had carried him on his back could do with his sound one. End of story 59.
Story 60 of Household Tales. Household Tales by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. The Two Brothers. There were once upon a time two brothers, one rich and the other poor. The rich one was a goldsmith and evil-hearted. The poor one supported himself by making brooms, and was good and honorable. The poor one had two children, who were twin brothers and as like each other as two drops of water. The two boys went backwards and forwards to the rich house, and often got some of the scraps to eat. It happened once, when the poor man was going into the forest to fetch brushwood, that he saw a bird which was quite golden and more beautiful than any he had ever chanced to meet with. He picked up a small stone, threw it at him, and was lucky enough to hit him. But one golden feather only fell down, and the bird flew away. The man took the feather and carried it to his brother, who looked at it and said, "It is pure gold," and gave him a great deal of money for it. Next day the man climbed into a birch tree and was about to cut off a couple of branches when the same bird flew out, and when the man searched he found a nest, and an egg lay inside it, which was of gold. He took the egg home with him and carried it to his brother, who again said, "It is pure gold," and gave him what it was worth. At last the goldsmith said, "I should indeed like to have the bird itself." The poor man went into the forest for the third time and again saw the golden bird sitting on the tree. So he took a stone and brought it down and carried it to his brother, who gave him a great heap of gold for it. "Now I can get on," thought he, and went contentedly home. The goldsmith was crafty and cunning, and knew very well what kind of bird it was. He called his wife and said, "Roast me the gold bird, and take care that none of it is lost. I have a fancy to eat it all myself." The bird, however, was no common one, but of so wondrous a kind that whosoever ate its heart and liver found every morning a piece of gold beneath his pillow. The woman made the bird ready, put it on the spit, and let it roast. Now it happened that while it was at the fire, and the woman was forced to go out of the kitchen on account of some other work, the two children of the poor broom maker ran in, stood by the spit, and turned it round once or twice, and as at that very moment two little bits of the bird fell down into the dripping tin, one of the boys said, "We will eat these two little bits. I'm so hungry, and no one will ever miss them." Then the two ate the pieces, but the woman came into the kitchen and saw that they were eating something and said, "What have you been eating?" "Two little morsels which fell out of the bird," answered they. "That must have been the heart and the liver," said the woman, quite frightened, and in order that her husband might not miss them and be angry, she quickly killed a young cock, took out his heart and liver, and put them beside the golden bird. When it was ready, she carried it to the goldsmith, who consumed it all alone and left none of it. Next morning, however, when he felt beneath his pillow and expected to bring out the piece of gold, no more gold pieces were there than there had always been. The two children did not know what a piece of good fortune had fallen to their lot. Next morning, when they arose, something fell rattling to the ground, and when they picked it up, there were two gold pieces. They took them to their father, who was astonished and said, "How can that have happened?" When next morning they again found two, and so on daily, he went to his brother and told him the strange story. The goldsmith at once knew how it had come to pass, and that the children had eaten the heart and liver of the golden bird, and in order to revenge himself, and because he was envious and hard-hearted, he said to the father, "Thy children are in league with the evil one. Do not take the gold, and do not suffer them to stay any longer in thy house, for he has them in his power, and may ruin thee likewise." The father feared the evil one, and painful as it was to him, he nevertheless led the twins forth into the forest, and with a sad heart left them there. And now the two children ran about the forest and thought the way home again, but could not find it, and only lost themselves more and more. At length they met with a huntsman, who asked, "To whom do you children belong?" "We are the poor broom maker's boys," they replied, and they told him that their father would not keep them any longer in the house, because a piece of gold lay every morning under their pillows. "Come," said the huntsman, "that is nothing so very bad. if at the same time you keep honest and are not idle. As the good man liked the children and had none of his own, he took them home with him and said, I'll be your father and bring you up till you are big. They learned huntsmanship from him, and the piece of gold which each of them found when he awoke was kept for them by him in case they should need it in the future. When they were grown up, their foster father one day took them into the forest with him and said, Today shall you make your trial shot, so that I may release you from your apprenticeship and make you huntsmen. They went with him to lie in wait and stay there a long time, but no game appeared. The huntsman, however, looked above him and saw a covey of wild geese flying in the form of a triangle, and said to one of them, Shoot me down, one from each corner. He did, and thus accomplished his trial shot. Soon after, another covey came flying by in the form of the figure 2, and the huntsman bade the other also bring down one from each corner, and his trial shot was likewise successful. Now, said the foster father, I pronounce you out of your apprenticeship. You are skilled huntsmen. Thereupon the two brothers went forth together into the forest, and took counsel with each other and planned something. And in the evening, when they had sat down to supper, they said to their foster father, We will not touch food or take one mouthful until you have granted us a request. Said he, What then is your request? They replied, We have now finished learning, and we must prove ourselves in the world. So allow us to go away and travel. Then spake the old man joyfully, You talk like brave huntsmen. That which you desire has been my wish. Go forth, all will go well with you. Thereupon they ate and drank joyously together. When the appointed day came, their foster father presented each of them with a good gun and a dog, and let each of them take as many of his saved-up gold pieces as he chose. Then he accompanied them a part of the way, and when taking leave, he gave them a bright knife and said, If ever you separate, stick this knife into a tree at the place where you part, and when one of you goes back, he will be able to see how his absent brother is faring. For the side of the knife which is turned in the direction by which he went will rust if he dies, but will remain bright as long as he is alive. The two brothers went still farther onwards and came to a forest which was so large that it was impossible for them to get out of it in one day. So they passed the night in it, and ate what they had put in their hunting pouches. But they walked all the second day likewise, and still did not get out. As they had nothing to eat, one of them said, We must shoot something for ourselves, or we shall suffer from hunger, and loaded his gun, and looked about him. And when an old hare came running up towards them, he laid his gun on his shoulder. But the hare cried, Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones to thee I'll give, and sprang instantly into the thicket, and brought 2 young ones. But the little creatures played so merrily, and were so pretty, that the huntsmen could not find it in their hearts to kill them. They therefore kept them with them, and the little hares followed on foot. Soon after this, a fox crept past. They were just going to shoot it, but the fox cried, Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones I'll also give. He too brought 2 little foxes, and the huntsman did not like to kill them either, but gave them to the hares for company, and they followed behind. It was not long before a wolf strode out of the thicket. The huntsman made ready to shoot him, but the wolf cried, Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones I'll likewise give. The huntsman put the two wolves beside the other animals, and they followed behind them. Then a bear came who wanted to trot about a little longer and cried, "Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones I too will give." The 2 young bears were added to the others, and there were already 8 of them. At length, who came? A lion came, tossed his mane, but the huntsmen did not let themselves be frightened, and aimed at him likewise. But the lion also said, "Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones I too will give." And he brought his little ones to them. And now the huntsman had 2 lions, 2 bears, 2 wolves, 2 foxes, and 2 hares, who followed them and served them. In the meantime their hunger was not appeased by this, and they said to the foxes, "Hark ye, cunning fellows, provide us with something to eat. You are crafty and deep." They replied, "Not far from here lies a village, from which we have already brought many a fowl. We will show you the way there." So they went into the village, bought themselves something to eat, had some food given to their beasts, and then travelled onwards. The foxes, however, knew their way very well about the district, and where the poultry yards were, and were able to guide the huntsmen. Now they travelled about for a while, but could not find no situation where they could remain together. So they said, "There is nothing else for it, we must part." They divided the animals so that each of them had a lion, a bear, a wolf, a fox, and a hare. Then they took leave of each other, promised to love each other like brothers till their death, and stuck the knife which their foster father had given them into a tree, after which one went east and the other went west. The younger, however, arrived with his beasts in a town which was all hung with black crape. He went into an inn and asked the host if he could accommodate his animals. The innkeeper gave him a stable, where there was a hole in the wall, and the hare crept out and fetched himself the head of a cabbage, and the fox fetched himself a hen, and when he had devoured that, got the cock as well. But the wolf, the bear, and the lion could not get out because they were too big. Then the innkeeper let them be taken to a place where a cow was just then laying on the grass, that they might eat till they were satisfied. And when the huntsman had taken care of his animals, he asked the innkeeper why the town was thus hung with black crape. Said the host, "Because our king's only daughter is to die tomorrow." The huntsman inquired if she was sick unto death. "No," answered the host. "She is vigorous and healthy. Nevertheless, she must die." "How's that?" asked the huntsman. "There is the hill without the town, whereon dwells a dragon who every year must have a pure virgin, or he lays the whole country waste. And now all the maidens have already been given to him, and there is no longer anyone left but the king's daughter. Yet there is no mercy for her. She must be given up to him, and that is to be done tomorrow." Said the huntsman, "Why is the dragon not killed?" "Ah," replied the host, "so many knights have tried it, but it has cost all of them their lives. The king has promised that he who conquers the dragon shall have his daughter to wife, and shall likewise govern the kingdom after his own death." The huntsman said nothing more to this, but next morning took his animals and with them ascended the dragon's hill. A little church stood at the top of it, and on the altar 3 full cups were standing, with the inscription, "Whosoever empties the cups will become the strongest man on earth, and will be able to yield the sword which is buried before the threshold of the door." The huntsman did not drink, but went out and sought for the sword in the ground, but was unable to move it from its place. Then he went in and emptied the cups, and now he was strong enough to take up the sword, and his hand could quite easily yield it. When the hour came when the maiden was to be delivered over to the dragon, the king, the marshal, and the courtiers accompanied her. From afar she saw the huntsman on the dragon's hill, and thought it was the dragon standing there waiting for her, and did not want to go up to him. But at last, because otherwise the whole town would have been destroyed, she was forced to go the miserable journey. The king and the courtiers returned home full of grief. The king's marshal, however, was to stand still and see all from a distance. When the king's daughter got to the top of the hill, it was not the dragon which stood there, but the young huntsman, who comforted her and said he would save her, led her into the church and locked her in. It was not long before the seven-headed dragon came thither with loud roaring. When he perceived the huntsman, he was astonished, and said, "What business hast thou here on the hill?" The huntsman answered, "I want to fight with thee," said the dragon. "Many knights have left their lives here. I shall soon have made an end of thee too." And he breathed fire out of his 7 jaws. The fire was to have blighted the dry grass, and the huntsman was to have been suffocated in the heat and smoke. But the animals came running up and trampled out the fire. Then the dragon rushed upon the huntsman, but he swung his sword until it sang through the air and struck off 3 of his heads. Then the dragon grew right furious and rose up in the air and spat out flames of fire over the huntsman, and was about to plunge down on him, but the huntsman once more drew out his sword and again cut off 3 of his heads. The monster became faint and sank down. Nevertheless, it was just able to rush upon the huntsman, but he, with his last strength, smote out his tail off, and as he could fight no longer, called up his animals, who tore it in pieces. When the struggle was ended, the huntsman unlocked the church, found the king's daughter lying on the floor, as she had lost her senses with anguish and terror during the contest. He carried her out, and when she came to herself once more and opened her eyes, he showed her the dragon all cut to pieces, and told her she was now delivered. She rejoiced and said, "Now thou wilt be my dearest husband, for my father has promised me to him who kills the dragon." Thereupon she took off her necklace of coral and divided it amongst the animals, in order to reward them, and the lion received the golden clasp. Her pocket handkerchief, however, on which was her name, she gave to the huntsman, who went and cut the tongues out of the dragon's 7 heads, wrapped them in the handkerchief, and preserved them carefully. That done, as he was so faint and weary with the fire and the battle, he said to the maiden, "We are both faint and weary. We will sleep a while." Then she said, "Yes," and they lay down on the ground. And the huntsman said to the lion, "Thou shalt keep watch, that no one surprise us in our sleep." And both fell asleep. The lion lay down beside them to watch, but he also was so weary with the fight that he called the bear and said, "Lie down near me, I must sleep a little. If anything comes, waken me." Then the bear lay down beside him, but he also was tired, and called the wolf and said, "Lie down by me, I must sleep a little, but if anything comes, waken me." Then the wolf lay down by him, but he was tired likewise, and called the fox and said, "Lie down by me, I must sleep a little, if anything comes, waken me." Then the fox lay down beside him, but he too was weary, and called the hare and said, "Lie down near me, I must sleep a little, and if anything should come, waken me." Then the hare sat down by him, but the poor hare was tired too, and had no one whom he could call there to keep watch, and fell asleep. And now the king's daughter, the huntsman, the lion, the bear, the wolf, the fox, and the hare were all sleeping a sound sleep. The marshal, however, who was to look on from a distance, took courage when he did not see the dragon flying away with the maiden, and finding that all the hill had become quiet, ascended it. There lay the dragon hacked and hewn to pieces on the ground, and not far from it were the king's daughter and a huntsman with his animals, and all of them were sunk in a sound sleep. And as he was wicked and godless, he took his sword, cut off the huntsman's head, and seized the maiden in his arms and carried her down the hill. Then she awoke and was terrified, but the marshal said, "Thou art in my hand. Thou shalt say that it was I who killed the dragon." "I cannot do that," she replied, "for it was a huntsman with his animals who did it." Then he drew his sword and threatened to kill her if she did not obey him, and so compelled her that she promised it. Then he took her to the king, who did not know how to contain himself for joy when he once more looked on his dear child in life, whom he had believed to have been torn to pieces by the monster. The marshal said to him, "I have killed the dragon, and delivered the maiden and the whole kingdom as well. Therefore I demand her as my wife, as was promised." The king said to the maiden, "Is what he says true?" "Oh, yes," she answered, "it must indeed be true, but I will not consent to have the wedding celebrated until after a year and a day." For she thought in that time she should hear something of her dear huntsman. The animals, however, were still lying sleeping beside their dead master on the dragon's hill, and there came a great humble-bee and lighted on the hare's nose, but the hare wiped it off with his paw and went on sleeping. The humble-bee came a second time, but the hare again rubbed it off and slept on. Then it came for the third time and stung his nose so that he awoke. As soon as the hare was awake, he roused the fox, and the fox the wolf, and the wolf the bear, and the bear the lion. And when the lion awoke and saw that the maiden was gone, and his master was dead, he began to roar frightfully and cried, "Who has done that? Bear, why dost thou not awaken me?" The bear asked the wolf, "Why dost thou not awaken me?" And the wolf the fox, "Why dost thou not awaken me?" And the fox the hare, "Why dost thou not awaken me?" And poor hare alone did not know what answer to make, and the blame rested with him. Then they were just going to fall upon him, but he entreated them and said, "Kill me not, I'll bring our master to life again. I know a mountain on which a root grows which, when placed in the mouth of anyone, cures him of all illness and every wound, but the mountain lies 200 hours' journey from here." The lion said, "In 24 hours must thou have run thither, and have come back, and have brought the root with thee." Then the hare sprang away, and in 24 hours he was back, and brought the root with him. The lion put the huntsman's head on again, and the hare placed the root in his mouth, and immediately everything united together again, and his heart beat and life came back. Then the huntsman awoke and was alarmed when he did not see the maiden, and thought, "She must have gone away whilst I was sleeping, in order to get rid of me." The lion, in his great haste, had put his master's head on the wrong way round, but the huntsman did not observe it because of his melancholy thoughts about the king's daughter. But at noon, when he was going to eat something, he saw that his head was turned backwards and could not understand it, and asked the animals what had happened to him in his sleep. Then the lion told him that they too had all fallen asleep from weariness, and on awaking had found him dead, with his head cut off, that the hare had brought a life-giving root, and that he in his haste had laid hold of the head the wrong way, but that he would repair his mistake. Then he tore the huntsman's head off again, turned it round, and the hare healed it with the root. The huntsman, however, was sad at heart, and travelled about the world, and made his animals dance before people. It came to pass that precisely at the end of 1 year he came back to the same town where he had delivered the king's daughter from the dragon, and this time the town was gaily hung with red cloth. Then he said to the host, "What does this mean? Last year the town was all hung with black crape. What means the red cloth today?" The host answered, "Last year our king's daughter was to have been delivered over to the dragon, but the marshal fought with it and killed it, and so tomorrow their wedding is to be solemnized, and that is why the town was then hung with black crape for mourning, and is today covered with red cloth for joy." Next day, when the wedding was to take place, the huntsman said at midday to the innkeeper, "Do you believe, sir host, that I, while with you here today, shall eat bread from the king's own table?" "Nay," said the host, "I would bet 100 pieces of gold that that will not come true." The huntsman accepted the wager, and set against it a purse with just the same number of gold pieces. Then he called the hare and said, "Go, my dear runner, and fetch me some of the bread which the king is eating." Now the little hare was the lowest of the animals, and could not transfer this order to any of the others, but had to get on his legs himself. "Alas," thought he, "if I bound through the streets thus alone, the butcher dogs will all be after me." It happened as he expected, and the dogs came after him and wanted to make holes in his good skin. But he sprang away. Have you never seen one running? And sheltered himself in a sentry box without the soldier being aware of it. Then the dogs came and wanted to have him out, but the soldier did not understand a jest, and struck them with the butt end of his gun, till they ran away yelling and howling. As soon as the hare saw that the way was clear, he ran into the palace and straight to the king's daughter, sat down under her chair and scratched at her foot. Then she said, "Wilt thou get away?" and thought it was her dog. The hare scratched her foot for the second time, and she again said, "Wilt thou get away?" and thought it was her dog. But the hare did not let itself be turned from its purpose, and scratched her for the third time. Then she peeped down, and knew the hare by its collar. She took him on her lap, carried him into her chamber, and said, "Dear hare, what dost thou want?" He answered, "My master who killed the dragon is here, and has sent me to ask for a loaf of bread, like that which the king eats." Then she was full of joy, and had the baker summoned, and ordered him to bring a loaf such as was eaten by the king. The little hare said, "But the baker must likewise carry it thither for me, that the butcher's dogs may do no harm to me." The baker carried it for him as far as the door of the inn, and then the hare got on his hind legs, took the loaf in his front paws, and carried it to his master. Then said the huntsman, "Behold, sir host, the 100 pieces of gold are mine." The host was astonished, but the huntsman went on to say, "Yes, sir host, I have the bread, but now I will likewise have some of the king's roast meat." The host said, "I should indeed like to see that," but he would make no more wagers. The huntsman called the fox and said, "My little fox, go and fetch me some roast meat such as the king eats." The red fox knew the byways better, and went by holes and corners without any dog seeing him, seated himself under the chair of the king's daughter, and scratched her foot. Then she looked down and recognized the fox by its collar, took him into her chamber with her, and said, "Dear fox, what dost thou want?" He answered, "My master who killed the dragon is here, and has sent me. I am to ask for some roast meat such as the king is eating." Then she made the cook come, who was obliged to prepare a roast joint, the same as was eaten by the king, and to carry it for the fox as far as the door. Then the fox took the dish, waved away with his tail the flies which had settled on the meat, then carried it to his master. "Behold, sir host," said the huntsman, "bread and meat are here, but now I will also have proper vegetables with it, such as are eaten by the king." Then he called the wolf and said, "Dear wolf, go thither and fetch me vegetables such as the king eats." Then the wolf went straight to the palace, as he feared no one, and when he got to the king's daughter's chamber, he twitched at the back of her dress so that she was forced to look round. She recognized him by his collar, and took him into her chamber with her, and said, "Dear wolf, what dost thou want?" He answered, "My master who killed the dragon is here. I am to ask for some vegetables, such as the king eats." Then she made the cook come, and he had to make ready a dish of vegetables, such as the king ate, and had to carry it for the wolf as far as the door. And then the wolf took the dish from him, and carried it to his master. "Behold, sir host," said the huntsman, "now I have bread and meat and vegetables, but I will also have some pastry to eat, like that which the king eats." He called the bear and said, "Dear bear, thou art fond of licking anything sweet. Go and bring me some confectionery such as the king eats." Then the bear trotted to the palace, and everyone got out of his way. But when he went to the guard, they presented their muskets, and would not let him go into the royal palace. But he got up on his hind legs, and gave them a few boxes on the ears, right and left with his paws, so that the whole watch broke up. And then he went straight to the king's daughter, placed himself behind her, and growled a little. Then she looked behind her, knew the bear, and bade him go into her room with her, and said, "Dear bear, what dost thou want?" He answered, "My master who killed the dragon is here, and I am to ask for some confectionery such as the king eats." Then she summoned her confectioner, who had to bake confectionery such as the king ate, and carried it to the door for the bear. When the bear first licked off the comfits which had rolled down, and then he stood upright, took the dish, and carried it to his master. "Behold, sir host," said the huntsman, "now I have bread, meat, vegetables, and confectionery, but I will drink wine also, and such as the king drinks." He called his lion to him and said, "Dear lion, thou thyself likest to drink till thou art intoxicated. Go and fetch me some wine, such as is drunk by the king." Then the lion strode through the streets, and the people fled from him. And when he came to the watch, they wanted to bar the way against him, but he did but roar once, and they all ran away. Then the lion went to the royal apartment, and knocked at the door with his tail. Then the king's daughter came forth, and was almost afraid of the lion, but she knew him by the golden clasp of her necklace, and bade him go with her into her chamber, and said, "Dear lion, what wilt thou have?" He answered, "My master who killed the dragon is here, and I am to ask for some wine such as is drunk by the king." Then she bade the cupbearer be called, who was to give the lion some wine, like that which was drunk by the king. The lion said, "I will go with him, and see that I get the right wine." Then he went down with the cupbearer, and when they were below, the cupbearer wanted to draw him some of the common wine that was drunk by the king's servants. But the lion said, "Stop, I will taste the wine first." And he drew half a measure, and swallowed it down at one draught. "No," said he, "that is not right." The cupbearer looked at him askance, but went on, and was about to give him some out of another barrel, which was for the king's marshal. The lion said, "Stop, let me taste the wine first," and drew half a measure and drank it. That is better, but still not right," said he. Then the cupbearer grew angry and said, "How can a stupid animal like you understand wine?" But the lion gave him a blow behind the ears, which made him fall down by no means gently, and when he had got up again, he conducted the lion quite silently into a little cellar apart, where the king's wine lay, from which no one ever drank. The lion first drew half a measure and tried the wine, and then he said, "That may possibly be the right sort," and bade the cupbearer fill 6 bottles of it. And now they went upstairs again. But when the lion came out of the cellar into the open air, he reeled here and there, and was rather drunk, and the cupbearer was forced to carry the wine as far as the door for him. And then the lion took the handle of the basket in his mouth, and took it to his master. The huntsman said, "Behold, sir host, here have I bread, meat, vegetables, confectionery, and wine, such as the king has, and now I will dine with my animals." And he sat down and ate and drank, and gave the hare, the fox, the wolf, the bear, and the lion also to eat and to drink, and was joyful, for he saw that the king's daughter still loved him. And when he had finished his dinner, he said, "Sir host, now have I eaten and drunk, as the king eats and drinks, and now I will go to the king's court and marry the king's daughter." Said the host, "How can that be, when she already has a betrothed husband, and when the wedding is to be solemnized today?" Then the huntsman drew forth the handkerchief which the king's daughter had given him on the dragon's hill, and in which were folded the monster's 7 tongues, and said, "That which I hold in my hands shall help me to do it." Then the innkeeper looked at the handkerchief and said, "Whatever I believe, I don't believe that, and am willing to stake my house and courtyard on it." The huntsman, however, took a bag with 1,000 gold pieces, put it on the table, and said, "I stake that on it." Now the king said to his daughter at the royal table, "What did all the wild animals want, which have been coming to thee and going in and out of my palace?" She replied, "I may not tell you, but send and have the master of these animals brought, and you will do well." The king sent a servant to the inn and invited the stranger, and the servant came just as the huntsman had laid his wager with the innkeeper. Then said he, "Behold, sir host, now the king sends his servants and invites me, but I do not go in this way." Then he said to the servant, "I request the lord king to send me royal clothing, and a carriage with 6 horses and servants to attend me." When the king heard the answer, he said to his daughter, "What shall I do?" She said, "Cause him to be fetched as he desires to be, and you will do well." Then the king sent royal apparel, a carriage with 6 horses and servants to await on him. When the huntsman saw them coming, he said, "Behold, sir host, now I am fetched, as I desired to be." And he put on the royal garments, took the handkerchief with the dragon's tongues with him, and drove off to the king. When the king saw him coming, he said to his daughter, "How shall I receive him?" She answered, "Go to meet him, and you will do well." Then the king went to meet him and led him in, and his animals followed. The king gave him a seat near himself and his daughter, and the marshal as bridegroom sat on the other side, but no longer knew the huntsman. And now, at this very moment, the 7 heads of the dragon were brought in as a spectacle, and the king said, "The 7 heads were cut off the dragon by the marshal, wherefore today I give him my daughter to wife." The huntsman stood up, opened the 7 mouths, and said, "Where are the 7 tongues of the dragon?" Then was the marshal terrified, and grew pale, and knew not what answer he should make. And at length, in his anguish, he said, "Dragons have no tongues?" The huntsman said, "Liars ought to have none, but the dragon's tongues are the tokens of the victor." And he unfolded the handkerchief, and there lay all 7 inside it. And he put each tongue in the mouth to which it belonged, and it fitted exactly. Then he took the handkerchief on which the name of the princess was embroidered, and showed it to the maiden, and asked to whom she had given it. And she replied, "To him who killed the dragon." And then he called his animals and took the collar of each of them and the golden clasp from the lion, and showed them to the maiden, and asked to whom they belonged. She answered, "The necklace and golden clasp were mine, but I divided them among the animals who helped to conquer the dragon." Then spake the huntsman, "When I, tired with the fight, was resting and sleeping, the marshal came and cut off my head. Then he carried away the king's daughter, and gave out that it was he who killed the dragon, but that he lied, I prove with the tongues, the handkerchief, and the necklace." And then he related how his animals had healed him by means of a wonderful root, and how he had travelled about with them for 1 year, and had at length again came there and had learned the treachery of the marshal by the innkeeper's story. Then the king asked his daughter, "Is it true that this man killed the dragon?" And she answered, "Yes, it is true. Now can I reveal the wicked deed of the marshal, as it has come to light without my connivance, for he wrung from me a promise to be silent. For this reason, however, did I make the condition that the marriage should not be solemnized for 1 year and a day." Then the king bade 12 counselors be summoned, who were to pronounce judgment on the marshal, and they sentenced him to be torn to pieces by 4 bulls. The marshal was therefore executed, but the king gave his daughter to the huntsman and named him his viceroy over the whole kingdom. The wedding was celebrated with great joy, and the young king caused his father and his foster father to be brought, and loaded them with treasures. Neither did he forget the innkeeper, but sent for him and said, "Behold, sir host, I have married the king's daughter, and your house and yard are mine." The host said, "Yes, according to justice it is so." But the young king said, "It shall be done according to mercy," and told him that he should keep his house and yard, and gave him the 1,000 pieces of gold as well. And now the young king and queen were thoroughly happy, and lived in gladness together. He often went out hunting because it was a delight to him, and the faithful animals had to accompany him. In the neighborhood, however, there was a forest of which it was reported that it was haunted, and that whosoever did but enter it did not easily get out again. The young king, however, had a great inclination to hunt in it, and let the old king have no peace until he allowed him to do so. So he rode forth with a great following, and when he came to the forest, he saw a snow-white hart, and said to his people, "Wait there until I return. I want to chase that beautiful creature." And he rode into the forest after it, followed only by his animals. The attendants halted and waited until evening, but he did not return. So they rode home, and told the young queen that the young king had followed a white hart into the enchanted forest, and had not come back again. Then she was in the greatest concern about him. He, however, had still continued to ride on and on after the beautiful wild animal, and had never been able to overtake it. When he thought he was near enough to aim, he instantly saw it bound away into the far distance, and at length it vanished altogether. And now he perceived that he had penetrated deep into the forest, and blew his horn, but he received no answer, for his attendants could not hear it. And as night too was falling, he saw that he could not get home that day. So he dismounted from his horse, lighted himself a fire near a tree, and resolved to spend the night by it. While he was sitting by the fire, and his animals were also lying down beside him, it seemed to him that he heard a human voice. He looked round, but could perceive nothing. Soon afterwards he again heard a groan, as if from above, and then he looked up and saw an old woman sitting in the tree, who wailed unceasingly, "Oh, oh, oh, how cold I am!" Said he, "Come down and warm thyself if thou art cold." But she said, "No, thy animals will bite me." He answered, "They will do thee no harm, old mother. Do come down." She, however, was a witch, and said, "I will throw down a wand from the tree, and if thou strikest them on the back with it, they will do me no harm." Then she threw him a small wand, and he struck them with it, and instantly they lay still and were turned into stone. And when the witch was safe from the animals, she leapt down and touched him also with a wand, and changed him to stone. Thereupon she laughed and dragged him and the animals into a vault, where many more such stones already lay. As, however, the young king did not come back at all, the queen's anguish and care grew constantly greater. And it so happened that at this very time the other brother had returned to the east when they separated, came into the kingdom, and had sought a situation, and had found none, and had then travelled about here and there, and had made his animals dance. Then it came into his mind that he would just go and look at the knife that they had thrust in the trunk of a tree at their parting, that he might learn how his brother was. When he got there, his brother's side of the knife was half rusted and half bright. Then he was alarmed and thought, "A great misfortune must have befallen my brother, but perhaps I can still save him, for half the knife is still bright." He and his animals travelled towards the west, and when he entered the gate of the town, the guard came to meet him and asked if he was to announce him to his consort, the young queen, who had for a couple of days been in the greatest sorrow about his staying away, and was afraid he had been killed in the enchanted forest. The sentries indeed thought no otherwise than that he was the young king himself, for he looked so like him, and had wild animals running behind him. Then he saw that they were speaking of his brother, and thought, "It would be better if I pass myself off for him, and then I can rescue him more easily." So he allowed himself to be escorted into the castle by the guard, and was received with the greatest joy. The young queen indeed thought that he was her husband, and asked him why he had stayed away so long. He answered, "I had lost myself in a forest, and could not find my way out again any sooner." At night he was taken to the royal bed, but he laid a two-edged sword between him and the young queen. She did not know what that could mean, but did not venture to ask. He remained in the palace a couple of days, and in the meantime inquired into everything which related to the enchanted forest, and at last he said, "I must hunt there once more." The king and the young queen wanted to persuade him not to do it, but he stood out against them, and went forth with a larger following. When he had got into the forest, it fared with him as with his brother. He saw a white hart, and said to his people, "Stay here and wait until I return. I want to chase the lovely wild beast." And then he rode into the forest, and his animals ran after him, but he could not overtake the hart. And he got so deep into the forest that he was forced to pass the night there. And when he had lighted a fire, he heard someone wailing above him, "Oh, oh, oh, how cold I am!" Then he looked up, and the self-same witch was sitting in the tree. Said he, "If thou art cold, come down, little old mother, and warm thyself." She answered, "No, thy animals will bite me." But he said, "They will not hurt thee." Then she cried, "I will throw down a wand to thee, and if thou smitest them with it, they will do me no harm." When the huntsman heard that, he had no confidence in the old woman, and said, "I will not strike my animals. Come down, or I will fetch thee." Then she cried, "What dost thou want? Thou shalt not touch me." But he replied, "If thou dost not come, I will shoot thee." Said she, "Shoot away, I do not fear thy bullets." Then he aimed and fired at her, but the witch was proof against all leaden bullets, and laughed and yelled and cried, "Thou shalt not hit me." The huntsman knew what to do, tore 3 silver buttons off his coat, and loaded his gun with them, for against them her arts were useless. and when he fired, she fell down at once with a scream. Then he set his foot on her and said, "Old witch, if thou dost not instantly confess where my brother is, I will seize thee with both my hands and throw thee into the fire." She was in a great fright and begged for mercy, and said, "He and his animals lie in a vault, turned to stone." Then he compelled her to go thither with him, and threatened her, and said, "Old sea-cat, now shalt thou make my brother and all the human beings lying here alive again, or thou shalt go into the fire." She took a wound and touched the stones, and then his brother with his animals came to life again, and many others, merchants, artisans, and shepherds arose, thanked him for their deliverance, and went to their homes. But when the twin brothers saw each other again, they kissed each other and rejoiced with all their hearts. Then they seized the witch, bound her, and laid her on the fire. And when she was burned, the forest opened of its own accord, and was light and clear, and the king's palace could be seen at about the distance of a 3 hours' walk. Thereupon the two brothers went home together, and on the way told each other their histories. And when the youngest said that he was ruler of the whole country in the king's stead, the other observed, "That I remark very well, for when I came to the town, and was taken for thee, all royal honours were paid me. The young queen looked on me as her husband, and I had to eat at her side and sleep in thy bed." When the other heard that, he became so jealous and angry that he drew his sword and struck off his brother's head. But when he saw him lying there dead, and saw his red blood flowing, he repented most violently. "My brother delivered me," cried he, "and I have killed him for it." And he bewailed him aloud. Then his heir came and offered to go and bring some of the root of life, and bound it away and brought it while yet there was time. And the dead man was brought to life again, and knew nothing about the wound. After this they journeyed onwards, and the youngest said, "Thou lookest like me, hast royal apparel on as I have, and the animals follow thee as they do me. We will go in by opposite gates, and arrive at the same time from the two sides in the aged king's presence." So they separated, and at the same time came the watchman from the one door and from the other, and announced that the young king and the animals had returned from the chase. The king said, "This is not possible. The gates lie quite a mile apart." In the meantime, however, the two brothers entered the courtyard of the palace from opposite sides, and both mounted the steps. Then the king said to the daughter, "Say, which is thy husband? Each of them looks exactly like the other. I cannot tell." Then she was in great distress, and could not tell, but at last she remembered the necklace which she had given to the animals. She thought for, and found her little golden clasp on the line, and she cried in her delight, "He who is followed by this line is my true husband." Then the young king laughed and said, "Yes, he is the right one." And they sat down together to table, and ate and drank, and were merry. At night, when the young king went to bed, his wife said, "Why hast thou for these last nights always laid a two-edged sword in our bed? I thought thou hadst a wish to kill me." Then he knew how true his brother had been. End of story 60.